Hi, good morning. Good morning, everyone. I was faced with a little bit of technical difficulty and hence the delay in coming in. But I hope you're all well. And I am pleased today to welcome you to this particular class on breaking the cycle. And this is on ancestral healing and shadow work. So I hope I'm coming in loud and clear. Those of you who are watching it live, maybe if you can, give me a heads up if I am, whether you can hear me and whether it is on. Appreciate it. Okay, so let's go. I'm checking in here and I don't seem to be... Okay, I am live. Appreciate it. Okay. So I'm gonna do some editing later on, and if you wanna, I will let you listen to the edited version so that we cut out all this technical glitch and all of that, right? The setup. But I had some real difficulty getting in and trying to set things up. So it's alright, I learned from this. So anyway, let me start again in my introduction. Welcome to this particular live stream. And my channel is very new, as you know. And I'm still trying to grow the channel and helping people to learn, to grow. And the classes that I do here are not sale classes. I'm not doing this to sell something. I'm doing it to share information, to share knowledge. And my name is Shamla Tan, and I am a spiritual teacher and wellness facilitator. And I have been a spiritual teacher for more than 20 years. So my journey has been a very long one, many ups and downs. So in all that I do, I've always been very focused on development of consciousness, growing spiritually, importance of defining one's consciousness through psychology. And so I learned a lot through spiritual psychology, and in the past few years I've been very involved in doing shadow work. Okay, so shadow work is such an important aspect of spiritual development and growth, and I feel that this is the missing link for many spiritual practitioners, mostly because in many spiritual practices, shadow work is kind of shunned or denied because people see it as non-spiritual. They feel like it is not a high-level spiritual practice. But in truth, it is. I feel that if you're able to confront your shadow, confront your dark side, you are at, the highest level, in terms of being able to confront self and work through your issues, instead of doing spiritual bypassing, which is, you plaster over your issues with spiritual practices and not want to confront those emotions, and they stay stuck and trapped in the physical body. I know so many spiritual people who are struggling with that, all the emotions stuck in the body, and they manifest as diseases. Unfortunately, that's how it is. And so as spiritual practitioners, meditating alone is not enough. And no matter what sort of traditional religion you have or traditional practice you have, it is really important to work on your psychology. Because without psychology, you really can't grow. All right, and that's the truth. I know most people don't want to hear that because it involves work. It involves hard work. It involves doing the actual work, right? And everybody wants like quick fix. Everybody wants to ascend, like in a new age term, they call it growing spiritually as ascend. They want to ascend quickly. They want to ascend on a fast path, but there is no fast path. I feel it's just an illusion, right? The fastest path is in fact the path where you move through your negativity. You've got to move through it. You don't skip over it, don't bypass it. Really need to be in the body. All right. So one of the key topics in shadow work is ancestral healing. And in ancestral healing, there is so much to uncover, because we have so much hidden stuff, within our being. And okay, I'm just looking at some technical something that is not working, but never mind, I'm just going to ignore it for now. So in shadow work, right, we are really looking at a lot of hidden agenda that we've been carrying within our bodies because it's in our ancestral line, is in our DNA, is in the mindset. And so when we are moving through the process of growth and development as a person, we may not be aware that we are unconsciously operating or behaving like our parents, and we so not only do we inherit like physical illnesses, right, diseases. People always say, oh, it's in your genes. This particular whatever disease or illness is in your genes, it's genetic. So you just be careful because you may have it as you grow older or you reach a certain age. So we not only carry that, right? We also carry the mindset, right? The mindset of or rather the kind of mindset that your family has. You do carry it with you. The superstitions, the cultures, the traditions, the type of thinking, the type of emotional energies, all of that, right? We do inherit that. And because it is so close, right, within our family dynamics, we don't even know that it is negative, or it doesn't serve us, or it is, sometimes it's silly, right? And especially when you look at certain superstitious tradition, and we follow it because we're afraid that something will go wrong, right? I know in the Chinese tradition, right, first day of Chinese New Year, people don't sweep the floor, because if you sweep the floor on the first day of Chinese New Year, it's bad luck, and you're going to sweep away all your luck. So this is such a powerful programming, right? It's passed down generations upon generations. We don't know who started it, right? But the person who started it has created such a powerful force that no Chinese family is going to sweep their floor on the first day, and all Chinese families, right? First day of Chinese New Year, they're not going to, sweep the floor on the first day of Chinese New Year. But it's silly if you think about it, because if something happens, if you have to sweep the floor, you have to sweep the floor, right? But people get so trapped in it, right? And the younger generations have been imprinted by this. So even my daughter, right? My daughter is 17 and she is mixed race, and she hears all this. And so first day of Chinese, or before Chinese New Year, she'll say, oh, I better clean my room. I don't want to clean my room on the first day of Chinese New Year, which I find it so amusing. I said, hey, if you drop something, you need to clean up, right? Don't be silly. But that happens. It's a very, very powerful programming. So we have a lot of these things that we carry within us. I mean, sweeping the floor is silly. It's not going to do any harm to us, so that's fine, right? So we do inherit funny stuff, good stuff, not so good stuff, all at the same time. And we are not able to see it because it's so close, right? So close to our family. Anything that is in close view, right? Like even if you put something right in front of your eyes, you're not be able to focus, you're not be able to see it because it's just too close. And so a lot of these negative programmings that we carry with us, right, from our ancestors, they are too close and we're not able to see them. And in some of the work that we do, right, in ancestral clearing and in doing shadow work, we really need to take a step back and to be able to observe ourselves and not be emotionally entangled as we're observing. when we have emotional entanglement in it, that's where we get lost, right? And that's where we find it very, very difficult to know what is right, what is wrong, where it begins and where it ends. Okay, so the focus in today's live stream here is on the psychology, right? The psychology. I feel like the psychology dictates everything else, dictates how we even perceive genetic disorders in terms of our physical well-being. And anyone can do this, right? Especially if you've been told, like, oh, your family carry this particular disease in the genes, so you need to be careful. Sometimes, even in healthcare, right, they'll tell you out of goodwill, but they don't realize how much imprinting and how much of that fear energy may be introduced into a person. When they ask, like, oh, did your family have cancer? And how old were they when they had cancer? So they do all these health checks, right? And then they ask you to be careful. Now, knowing this is important so that you can do something to prevent it, right? It's not for you to await death or await like doomsday. That's not the point at all, right? So that's why the psychology is so important. The mindset, how we are looking at ourselves and how we are aware. I think the self-awareness is really key. Without self-awareness, we don't get anywhere, right? Self-awareness is one of the most important ingredients, right, in spiritual development and consciousness work. And even if you don't want to grow spiritually, it's fine, but you want to be a healthy human being, right? Your psychology has to be really clear, and this means that you need to have self-awareness. And what is self-awareness? Right? Self-awareness is to question self, being aware of what you are doing and questioning yourself, and to wake up, to awaken yourself and to ask yourself, hey, what am I doing here? Is this the right thinking? And to have critical thinking. So you do not just follow, you do not just follow whatever anyone says, whether it's your family or even greater society. Be able to think for yourself. When you're able to think for yourself, then you have greater self-awareness, right? The lack of self-awareness is what drives us to many of the sufferings that we are facing right now in our lives, right? So self-awareness is very important. So bringing conscious awareness. So one of the things I would recommend that you do as homework is in your journal, write a list of things that are practices or mindsets or thinking nature that your family, follows really, really strictly, or maybe even casually, like the Chinese New Year thing, no sweeping floor, first day of Chinese New Year, right? So that is one thing you could put on your list. Some families would have a certain way of doing things. Like if you think this way, I'm trying to think from the top of my mind. Some of the things that I've been taught, since I was a child. But because I've spent so much time in my own consciousness work, working through my psychology, that I've abandoned many of these thinking, right? Such as the Chinese New Year, no sweeping floor on first day. It has no meaning to me. So that's one thing, right, that I abandoned. The good stuff I keep, of course. My father is a very strong proponent of don't take so much processed food. He nags about this a lot. No fast food. He does this a lot when we were younger. So this is strong in me. So this is something that I strictly follow as much as I can. And so in terms of health, right, I inherited some good thinking. I think because my family line, I guess my father has witnessed enough, the family members inheriting certain diseases, right? So we inherit good stuff as well. So in your list, write down all the things, the thinking the mindsets. I know some families do this, right? Like if you make a mistake, instead of helping you to correct yourself, you are being chastised, you are being blamed, you are being called names. Now that is a practice that you don't want to inherit. You want to break that cycle, because if you inherit that, then you're going to do it to yourself. It's an automatic thing, right? You will do it to yourself, and then you do it to your children and future generations. So you get chastised for making mistakes. Like instead of learning from mistakes or teaching you to learn from the mistakes, you get chastised. That's one example. Another one where I observe a lot is when children go out to play, right? They're on a playground and then they fall down, and instead of comforting the child, sometimes the parents would hit the child for falling down. Which, you think about it, is as an outsider looking, right? You think like, what? What's going on? The child fell, the child hurt himself or herself, and you're hitting the child, like you're causing more pain. But what is actually happening is the parent losing control of the situation, right? They feel like they have lost control of the situation, and they're trying to gain control back. And so in order to gain control back, they express anger. And because they're not able to contain the anger, it comes out as violence, right? Physical violence. I consider any hitting of children or caning children violence. Is an act of violence. No matter what you want to say about this, I know people like to argue with me and they say, oh, you cannot spare the rod and spoil the child, that sort of thing. But it's an act of violence. To me, there's no two ways about it. Okay, it is an act of violence. So sometimes people say, oh, I was caned a lot as a child and I turned out fine. But when I observe the person, I say, I don't think so. I don't think you turn out fine. You have so much baggage and the shadow energies and all that, and you're not even aware, right? So that's something that you might want to also consider. I mean, if you've been hit a lot as a child, you might want to put down in your list, right? Things that you inherit from your mother and your father. Some of the things that we carry with us would be our parents' pain, right? As children, maybe we listen to their stories about how they suffered and their pain, and usually they share out of goodwill. They share because they want to, they want us to learn, they want us to understand. But if we're too young and we're not able to process the information, we will take it as pain, and we carry that pain, and we may not realize that we carry that in our bodies. And when we grow up, these seemingly sad energies or depressive energies or anxious energies that we have no idea where they come from suddenly surfaces, right? It could be energies that we are just simply carrying, from our parents. So we inherit that, all right? And we don't want to pass down these emotions or thought forms or mindsets. And pass it down to our children. Okay. Now, if we don't have children, then we may then go into self-attack, right? Into the consciousness where we go into our in how we communicate with our inner child. Okay, so that can happen. So in your journal, make a list of all the things that you can think of. I mean, there's no rush, there's no deadline. Keep an open journal about this, like every time you spot something, you journal it. You write it down like, oh, this is one thing that I inherited, from my mother or my father. Now, if your parents have a way of communicating, let's say they treat you with silence, or when they withdraw love, when you misbehave, you need to put it down, because that is something that has impacted you, and you will likely behave this way towards your spouse, towards your children, towards other people. You will give them the cold shoulder, you give them the silent treatment, if this is something that your parents do. And if your parents, just observe, like the things they do and the things you do. the way they communicate with you and how you communicate with your spouse, your partner, your loved ones. There is a pattern. There is always a pattern. And when you bring conscious awareness to these patterns, you catch yourself and you break the cycle. That's the first step. Second step is to heal, of course, the woundings, right? You heal. Maybe as you remember, you recognize the pain in your body. You may not have conscious memory, but you recognize the pain in your body when certain emotions come up, like when you watch a movie or when someone says something which has the same vibrational frequency or energy as something that your mother or father said to you in the past, and you feel that pain in that particular part of your body, then that's an energy, right? It's a shadow energy lodged within the physical body, and that's when you need to sit with it. Not to avoid it, not to suppress it, not to repress it, none of that. Sit with it. Sit and allow the energies to be expressed. It's not easy to do this, so I would highly recommend working with a therapist, right? Because it's not easy sitting down and say, okay, I want to feel the pain that I felt when my mother told me the story about her childhood, and I felt her pain then as a child, and I'm feeling the pain now, and I want to just sit with it, right? It's not as easy. In this sort of work, I always recommend doing it with someone who is good at it and who is able to sit in a session with you and to supervise the session. That is far more fruitful than trying to sit and work with it and not get anywhere, and then you end up saying, but it doesn't work. Of course it doesn't work. You don't have the know-how, right? But if you want to try, you want to attempt this on your own, you need to sit with it. And you sit with it for as long as the emotion is still there. Every time you bring up that emotion, it's still there. It means it has not been transmuted. To deal with these kind of emotions, right, is about moving through it, not moving away from it. Our default in the world that we live in, right, in this society that we live in, we want quick fixes. So all we do is we move away from negative emotions. We move away from negative thinking. We move away, when in truth we have to move through it. And only when we move through them, we gain the enlightenment, right? It's like imagining yourself like a caterpillar in, I use this analogy a lot because it's the simplest analogy. You move through, you're in a cocoon, right, with that negative emotion, and you move through, and then you emerge as the butterfly, right? So it's about moving through our negative emotions, moving through our negative thinking. It is not avoiding them. Avoiding them makes them more powerful. Whatever is in the shadow and you push them further into the shadow, it has so much power to control your every movement, to control all your decisions, and you think that you are the one in charge. No, you think that it is your conscious mind being in charge of your decisions. No, it is the unconscious. It is the shadow. And the more powerful the shadow is, the less power you have consciously. That's how it is. Okay? And so every time you make a decision, you ask yourself, is this decision coming from the shadow? Am I making an unconscious decision because I'm fearful of something? Or am I making a decision because I'm really empowered? When you are filled with a lot of fear, right, and you're not healed, your choices are very limited because you only know one thing, and that is to escape. But if you heal through your pain, right, and all the shadow stuff, all the suffering, right, that has had control over you maybe your entire life because of, your family ancestral thinking, the certain kind of mindset you operate from, and if you keep working on, being aware and stop the cycle, then you find that, hey, I have so many choices. I see things much more clearly. I can make choices. I can move out of this. Okay? And so keep that journal open because it's an ongoing process. It's not something that you do in one session. I find it really, really amusing whenever people come to me for sessions and they tell me, you know what, I looked at my inner child issues, for example, inner child, right? Oh, I thought I've already healed this. I did a session 10 years ago and I thought I already healed this. And I always say, my dear friend, this is an ongoing process. It's not something you've done 10 years ago and it's over. It's not like something on our to-do list where we tick and say, oh, it's done, move on to the next thing. It's ongoing. There's always stuff coming up, and we are people talk about being multi-dimensional beings, right? What is a multi-dimensional being? Multi-dimensional being doesn't mean that we are some evolved ascended master and we have one part of us in this universe, or we have a higher self in that universe. That's not the definition of multi-dimensional being as I see it. I see multi-dimensional being as we have these different aspects of us experiencing life at different timelines in our life that we have experienced that are unhealed, that we left behind. The child that we left behind when we were caned as a 6-year-old. The 14-year-old that felt the pain when we broke up in our relationship and we did not heal that. That one we left in one universe, right? Waiting for you as a grown-up to come and retrieve that 14-year-old to bring the stuff up to be healed, right? So this is the true multidimensional, not the fantasy multidimensional. This is something that I feel very passionate about, and I like to drum into so-called light workers and spiritual people constantly. Because when they are so proudly declaring that they're multi-dimensional beings, and I wait to listen, okay, what do you mean by multi-dimensional beings? And they automatically always tell me, oh, I'm an angel from level whatever, and I have descended down here to serve humanity. I say, oh gosh, you are here in the human consciousness matrix to work through the human stuff. I don't care who you were in your bloody past life, right? It really doesn't matter. You can tell me you are whatever. I'll still say, go back and work on your inner child issues. You can tell me, right, past life you were Cleopatra or Jesus Christ or whatever. If I see that you have inner child issues, you jolly well work through your inner child issues. You are not free from it. You are not, as long as you enter into this energy matrix of the earth, you will be confronted with all of the ego issues, the consciousness issues. You carry that in your matrix. You are never, you don't have immunity from it. Unless you're an avatar. And avatars are rare. And currently we don't have one on the planet as far as I'm aware. Okay? So is really important. So multi-dimensional being means that you have all these stuff that you have not retrieved. All these broken bits of your consciousness scattered all over in your energy field, in your aura, that's still bits and pieces, and you want them to come together. You want them to be integrated in, so you become whole. That's the only way to become whole. You don't become whole just by integrating your higher self. You become whole also by retrieving all these broken parts of you. I know people in New Age don't like to use the word broken, right? I'm not saying that you are broken, right? I'm saying those parts that are not healed. And, the unhealed parts of self needs to be integrated. So ancestral stuff, right, plays a major, major role, okay? So you can, in some meditation practice, you might like to go into connecting with the inner child, one of them, right? Inner child issues is one of the biggest. I think I'll do one live stream on inner child. I feel it's such an important topic because the ancestral stuff impacts the inner child the most, right? Our growing up years, right, from 0 to when we're 21, we are completely helpless and in the care of our parents. And our parents, if they have not worked through their psychology, what's going to happen? They carry whatever they have carried, right? Whatever trauma that they've had. And then they impart those to us. So the child within us is usually the most traumatized and brutalized in that sense, right? We get chopped up, in metaphorically, right? We get so we don't get the care that we deserve, and not because our parents don't care. I mean, they're just doing their best, but because everyone carries this trauma, and so we need to break that cycle so that we don't pass it down. Okay, so the journal, right? That's the important thing. Do the meditation. Meditation to get in touch with the inner child, the child within. And ask the child, like if you can recall certain things that you have been so fearful of growing up. I remember this, for me, this I feel is more than just ancestral. Growing up as in Catholic schools, and the emphasis is on your virginity, right? In a Catholic girls' school, on top of it, and the emphasis has always been, staying a virgin. And when you go for catechism, right? I mean, they talk about this so much, and you have this fear, like, oh my God, what if I start dating and then I lose my virginity, right? All of these, it's so powerful programming, right? And it's very traumatizing if you don't have the right context. And so, I had my fair share of trauma from, this particular Christian organization. Let's put it that way. So, and I'm sure many of you, right, listening to this also had probably the same, right? Depending on what kind of background you grew up in certain traditions, the trauma, right, is powerful because I feel some of these teachings are imparted to us without the right context. And they simplify it too much to the point where we just take it at face value. And it's really harming, right, in the long term. Okay, so do you have questions? Anyone has questions? I received some questions, so I'm gonna break this particular live stream to answer this particular question. One of the questions is, can you suggest some simple techniques for healing ancestral trauma that I can incorporate into my daily practice? Okay, so depending on what your daily practice is, I would say if your daily practice is meditation, maybe you spend 30 minutes a day meditating, I would say incorporate a part of your meditation to getting in touch with any aspect of your wounded self. So the wounded self could be your inner child, the wounded self could be something that your parents said to you that traumatized you, that scared the shit out of you, or something that you heard, something that you witnessed that they did, and it's been, an imprint, very strong imprint within your consciousness. And you recall that emotion. You don't have to recall the scene, you recall the emotion and feel it in your body. You can make that as your daily practice. You can incorporate it, right? And of course, the other thing is daily journaling. When you do your normal journaling and you, jot down, some of the things that you know, and maybe do a dialogue, with that aspect of yourself. Have a conversation. You can write it out, you can record it, but I always find writing, not typing, right? Writing it out really is far more effective because it exercises a different part of your brain versus typing, and the recall becomes very physical, and is the physical sensation that we want to activate, because recollection of energy on the cellular level is very, very powerful. And you have a pen and paper, right? When you write, it brings your whole being is involved in the process. When you're able to touch paper, when you're able to touch your pen, pencil, and you do the actual writing, it's a very powerful process. So do that. Another question that I receive here is, can healing ancestral trauma affect my family members and future generations? Definitely. All right, definitely. How? Firstly, when you stop the cycle, you will have a positive impact in your future generations. It doesn't matter whether your kids, whether you are not a mother yet or not a father yet, or whether you already have kids and they're grown up. It will still have a positive impact, because when you shift within your consciousness, there's a rippling effect down the family line. is an invisible line, isn't it? The family, the energy cords, all right, that we have. Now, of course, if they do their own consciousness work, it's gonna be much more powerful. If not, then you are just being a more positive source of light, positive source of energy that you're sending out to your family and to future generations, because you have stopped that cycle. Okay. So when you heal your ancestral trauma, whatever it may be, it does have a very powerful impact. And not only does it change energetically, not only does it change like your current family and also the future generations, on the psychic level, it also clears up the past, right? That means your ancestral line before you, it clears up the energies as well. You lighten the load of the family line, family energy. Okay, it will be lightened. It's not some magic trick. There is no quick fixes, which means that even if you spend every day doing a meditation where you're cutting cords, and if the trauma is very deep and you have not done the psychological work, you're still attached. All right, so it's not a magical one where you every day you do, cutting cords with ancestors, and you just do a ritual where you are cutting cords. Yes, it helps, but if you don't address the deep trauma embedded in your beingness, then you are just doing everyday cutting cords but not addressing the real thing. Then it's just going to stay stuck, right? And it can manifest as illnesses, diseases, because any energy is not cleared within the physical body will have to manifest itself. It needs to get out, right? It will move through your being, and it needs to get out somehow, and so it may erupt, and the eruption may be, is like an ulcer, right? It needs to pop, and so we don't want it to pop in the wrong way. So the idea is to be empowered. So you make empowered moves, and you do this on the psychological level. That means you are consciously doing it, and you are clearing the trauma on the psychological level, not energy level, not just energy. It's not enough, all right? It is part of the healing process, right? Doing energy work is part of it, but the root or the foundation for your clearing is the psychotherapy work. And it's something that we cannot run away from. You cannot spiritualize it. You cannot plaster it down with spiritual practices. You cannot plaster it down with 100 Hail Marys, or 108 chants of Buddha's name or whatever. You can't. It doesn't work, because the psychology is still locked in there, and addressing the trauma, you have to go deep, in order for it to work. Okay, so I hope that answers your question. Can you share a personal experience? Can you share a personal experience with ancestral healing and how it has impacted your life? I would say for me, it is ongoing. There are always new things popping up, and I do this by observing my own parents. And I hope my parents are not watching this, but my parents grew up at a time when during World War II, right? During the Japanese occupation, as they call it. And so a lot of deep trauma, right, in them. And so they grew up at a time where it was extremely challenging, didn't know any better. And so they also lost their parents. I think both of my parents lost at least one parent. And so the inner child was not given the space, right, to grow up in a way. So there's, a lot of deep trauma. And so for me from the time I started my spiritual journey, I knew how important it was to work on my inner child, and that was when I was 21. I started reading books, and I knew that there's something off in my parents. When I observed them, like, something is not quite right. And so I did a lot of reading, did a lot of research, worked through inner child issues, and for me, I became really, really passionate about inner child work. And I started, doing inner child regression for clients and all that when I started my practice 10 years down the road, right? When I was 30, I started doing this work, journaling with clients and working through inner child stuff. So for me, when I observe my parents, even now, right, they're almost 90, and I can see how the inner child consciousness is just running them, but I do it from a point of observation, and I don't judge them, I don't blame them. I mean, that's how they grew up, right? So, but I see and I notice that, okay, this is something very interesting to watch and observe, and I compare, in inverted commas, right, myself and my positioning and how I behave towards them. And I would never behave, and I will not behave in the way that they behave, towards me. And I treat them as equals, and so it's, the how it has shifted for me is really observing, and seeing how that I do not want to be run by my inner child consciousness. And I honor the inner child, and so some days, because my mom also has early onset dementia, so some days I allow my inner child to come out to play with her. So I would have silly conversations with her, like a child to a child, right? And just to awaken something in her. But in terms of caring, right, I see caring for her, I operate totally from my own inner parent, the adult consciousness, and seeing how they need my help. And in me responding to people, right, when I'm challenged by people, like friends or clients and all that, I see that I, as an individual, comes from an adult perspective, and when I see someone operating from an inner child consciousness, I would not put myself as a inner child and trying to debate. If you think about it, as a grown-up, you don't fight with children, right? You walk away from it. And so so it has completely changed, impacted my life and how I operate as a person, as a human being. Sometimes the inner child comes out and be mischievous, right? And I allow it in certain situations, especially when I'm dealing with people that I know, like narcissists, right? Dealing with narcissistic people, I just allow the mischievous part of me to I do a lot of wordplay, so in my communication sometimes with narcissists, that's what I would do. And for me, it's like, okay, it's just for fun. I know that no conversation is gonna, whatever I say is not gonna get through a narcissist anyway. So, and I just do it for fun, like, okay, I just do this to bug them or to irritate them, but but that's it, not big harm, no big harm done. So for me, it's I guess, clearing this ancestral trauma, right? And seeing how I was growing up and treated by my parents and how they operated, and taking a step back, right? It's changed my life, right? And I would say it set the entire trajectory also for my life's work, because my life's work is really, helping people to grow up, right? Most people are grown-ups, but they're still operating from a teenage consciousness. So I would say it has made a huge impact. Okay. Any questions? Anyone who's watching this live stream, you can feel free to type in. Okay, and I'd like to go back to the topic at hand. The role of forgiveness and compassion in the healing process. Okay, this is a very important part. right? I mean, as much as we can, journal and do our meditation or work with a therapist to clear, but if we don't have forgiveness and if we don't have compassion in the healing process, it's very hard to break away from it. The compassion really has to come from the adult consciousness. The inner child consciousness, is do not have the capacity or the bandwidth to be able to come up with a compassionate heart. So the adult has to step in, right? And in ancestral work, when you're, let's say you know where this particular mindset is coming from, or this trauma that you've been carrying with you for a long time, it's coming from, right? Mother, father, grandfather, or uncle, or whatever, right? People that have done things, or you perceive as these things done to you, right? It's always perception. And the compassion and the forgiveness is vital. But don't be too quick to forgive. Don't be too quick to be compassionate. Why am I saying this? Because when we are too quick to forgive, we then think that we have healed. And then we say, oh, I don't need to do the work. I'm very healed. I forgive them. Right? Like the saying goes, if you forgive, you forget. But you really cannot do that too quickly. You need to work through. I would say work with forgiveness only when you have worked through the trauma. But have compassion for self as you go through it, which means be gentle with yourself as you work through your stuff. And when you're too quick to forgive, the tendency is to reach for quick fixes because you're so quick in forgiving. But you will not be able to be compassionate towards self. You'll be so hard on yourself. And you go into self-blame. When you go into self-blame, it defeats the entire practice, right? The entire process. And then the trauma goes deeper, right? And so when you do ancestral healing, address the trauma and don't try to address all of them at the same time. Deal with one thing at a time, right? And know that it's a process. Don't set this impossible deadline. There are no deadlines, right? The reality is this, there are no deadlines. And this is something that I tell my clients all the time. The question that people ask me is, how many sessions do I need? And I always ask them, how many sessions do you think you need to forgive yourself or to forgive this person or to be compassionate? And I'll ask them, how long have you had this trauma embedded within you? And let's say they're 40 years old and they say, oh, I guess all my life, 40 years old. And then I go, so you want to clear this in 3 minutes in one session? Of course not, right? You've had it for 40 years, then, how long do you think it's going to take? But I can say that, even though you've been carrying it with you for 40 years, it doesn't mean that you're going to take another 40 years to heal. Of course not, right? If you do this productively, constructively, and you work with a good therapist who's able to journey with you, then definitely you're going to be very fruitful. I also do not encourage like forever kind of therapy. Like you can't stay stuck in therapy forever. Then that's not a good therapist. It's not productive. You're not getting anywhere. Okay. Through every session, there must be something that you feel like, okay, I've lightened the load on this particular area of my life. You cannot just go through the motions in therapy and feel like, you have. I see that happening a lot also, right? There are extremes, people who avoid therapy and people who are stuck in therapy. There are extremes. Hit the middle ground, right? Hit the middle ground. Don't stay forever. Okay, so compassion. Compassion towards self means being gentle. Don't set deadlines. Don't be too harsh. Don't be harsh at all. And work through it and know that it is deep trauma that you're carrying within yourself and you need time, right, to work through, okay? And as you work through, pay attention to the sensations. Have the self-awareness of how light or how much lighter you may be feeling physically I have a video on my other channel, and it is about how the body is a wonderful barometer, and it tells you exactly where the energies are and how you're feeling and how much you have kept embedded in your beingness. I'll send an email out if you're on my email list. I'll send an email out to give you the link on that particular video, and you can watch it. It's a very short video, and I talk about how our body is a wonderful barometer. And so our body, right, to have this awareness of how your body is holding on to certain fears, certain ancestral stuff, right, is really, really vital. In doing ancestral healing work, having body awareness is very important. And I always recommend grounding, right, every day, to ground your energies, to have body awareness. When you have body awareness, you not only automatically take better care of yourself, you become very conscious of what you consume. Consumption is not just food. Consumption is what you take in, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and you draw clearer boundaries, right? So body awareness is really, really important when you want to clear ancestral stuff, because a lot of the ancestral energies are encoded in our DNA structure. And when you have that body awareness, you are communicating and you're telling your physical body, you are rewriting your DNA in that sense, right? You're feeding your cells, you're telling your cells, hey, I'm shifting, and I want to have this awareness that when I have certain emotions in my body and when I make different choices in my body, I want to make a different choice. And when I consume a different thing, as opposed to, like, let's say you are really tempted to consume this unhealthy processed stuff, and then you say, I make a different choice, right? I dump the junk food and I go for a healthier option. You are telling your cells that you are worth it, and you are rewriting your DNA, right? Because your cells are listening to you all the time. And when you're able to do that, you clear some of the stuff, right? I mean, if you grew up in a family where you're fed with fast food, instant noodles, right, and all that, maybe, your home environment is such that there's no one to cook, or your family can't afford more nutritious meals, then you grew up on that. And that may be comfort food for you, and you may have it once in a while, it's fine. But if you have it constantly and daily, you are telling yourselves that you are worth junk, right? And when you're worth junk, that means that you are going to just hold on to the junk ancestral programming, the thinking, the mindset, all that junky stuff, which obviously you don't want to hold on to. So body awareness plays a huge role, okay, in ancestral clearing. Okay. Okay, so a question here. Why do I feel everything is meant for me? Can you clarify that? What do you mean by everything is meant for you? Are you saying the bad things are meant for you, or are you saying the good things? Can you clarify that question for me, Fiona? Okay, and I'll come back to your question. Okay, once I get that clarification. So let me see what else is on my list here. Okay, in terms of rituals, I feel like rituals do play a part, right, in our healing process. We all need rituals. We're humans, right? We all need rituals. So these rituals can be a ritual that you create. Maybe you want to create a space when you are, let's say you want to sit down before meditation, or sit down before you do journaling. And the focus is really on ancestral stuff, right? You can create a ritual where maybe you light a candle, right? And when you light a candle, you look at the flame and you dedicate this light, right, to your family ancestral line. And that is, ritual, right? And every time you light a candle, it reminds you of your ancestral line and how much more empowerment, you're looking forward to, and how much healing light you're sending to your ancestral line. Okay, so that's one ritual, an example of a ritual that you can incorporate into your your practice. You can also have different rituals. Some people like to maybe have a tea, right? A mug of tea when they are doing certain journaling. So that can be a ritual as simple as tea, coffee, like a drink, and you do a ritual. Am I still here live? Okay, something disappeared on me, and I'm wondering whether I am still. I hope I'm still live. Okay. Okay. So I'm getting back to what Fiona said. Oh, okay. Whatever I'm speaking, you feel like it's getting stuck in therapy. Okay. Yeah. I would suggest maybe a change of scenery. Maybe good for you if you're getting stuck in therapy and not getting anything out of it. Look for someone else. Do something more productive. If you find it's not empowering, then you're stuck in a loop. Okay, that's my advice to you. Okay, so I hope that helps, Fiona. Does anyone have questions? Anyone watching live, do you have any questions besides what I just shared? I've shared quite a lot about, I've shared about rituals, I've shared about therapy, I've shared about compassion, healing. Now, cutting cords can be a ritual, right? Cutting cords can be a good ritual that you can do, but know that it is not the answer. All right, it is not the answer. It is not the only thing that you do, right? Going deep into the trauma is necessary, but cutting cords can be a very good ritual. I find this ritual very helpful. It helps me to end the day. It helps me to stop carrying other people's energies with me, right? I mean, cutting cords is a good thing to clear, but it's not the answer, right? It's not the solution. Okay, so so I just want to recap, right? I'm just recapping what are the things that we've just shared. So when it comes to ancestral healing, it's not just about physical illness, right? It's mindset, it's about certain superstitions, culture, traditions. Certain traditions are good to keep, obviously, because if it ties family together, if you have a family tradition of like meeting at a certain time, to have a meal together, obviously that's a good tradition. Like if you, on birthdays, everyone come together, obviously that's a good tradition, that you should carry on. And maybe allow it to evolve as everyone gets older, right? I mean, you change how things move. Certain traditions you keep. But if mindsets that are toxic, mindsets that are poisonous, mindsets that are not empowering, right? Mindsets that keep you small, mindsets that make you feel bad or inferior, then obviously those things needs to be cleared. So let's say if you grow up and one of your parents is always chastising you, always scolding you, saying you're not good enough, or comparing you with others, and all these kind of things, right? We've all been through that. But if you have, if it's constant and it still impacts you, and if a criticism from someone like your boss, or criticism, maybe if it's constructive criticism from someone who is wanting you to do better, and immediately you feel like a child sitting in that room or sitting on that chair, then is your inner child, right? Then which means the ancestral trauma, the energy you've carrying with you is still there, and this particular habit is probably inherited, like from your mom or dad, from their own parents, right? That have been chastised. I know in certain cultures, right, to get people to motivate someone to do better, they do a lot of like scolding and criticism. It's a very interesting way. Personally, I don't think that's motivation, right? That's the demotivation, if anything at all. It's not a motivational talk. but I guess it's very common in the Asian context, right? I catch myself doing that sometimes, you know, with my own daughter, and I go like, whoa, okay, where's that coming from? Okay, so stop it. It's very unconscious, right? Because it's in the shadow. And if we don't catch ourselves, then we go into this, you know, the never-ending cycle, and then your kid is going to carry on with it. Okay, so yeah, let me see. Any more questions? Let me check my list of questions that I got. Are there any potential risks to doing ancestral healing work? I'm trying to think of all the well, it depends on your perspective on ancestral work, right? I mean, sometimes people see ancestral healing work from a very superstitious perspective. So they do rituals and they get like a witch doctor, you know, that kind of ancestral healing work is very psychic level, right? Then maybe I say potentially, you know, that there may be some danger, because then it's not empowering, firstly, and then you don't know what kind of psychic energies you're going to send to your family line, ancestral line, right? But if you're talking about what I'm talking about, which is the psychology, the shadow work, right, doing all of these type of work, whether there's a danger, no, of course not, right? If anything, you're lightening the load in your family line. If anything, you're lightening the load of your ancestral line, right? And you're lightening everyone's load. Everyone feels happier, and especially the future generations, right? So let's say this is for the benefit of people who don't have kids, but maybe you have a sibling with kids. When you make that shift, right, the future generation in your sister's family line can also be positively impacted. But of course, you know, encouraging them to go for therapy is important as well, which means energetically you may have lightened the load, but then the trauma within their bodies still needs to be worked on, right? The trauma within their psychology still needs to be worked on. So it's still, you know, there are benefits, obviously, right? So yeah. Okay, so I hope that answers the question. Let me see whether, I think there is one more question here. Is ancestral healing a form of therapy? If so, how does it differ from traditional forms of therapy? Ancestral healing is not a therapy per se. Ancestral healing is part of therapy work, right? Which means that if a person is going through ongoing therapy and you are addressing ancestral healing for that particular session, then, you know, it's just part of it. It's not a separate thing. But it can be, right? I mean, some people, some psychotherapists maybe only focus on ancestral work. I don't know. I mean, there could be people out there doing that. But I would say, by and large, is part of the process of you know, therapy work, shadow work, right? Ancestral healing is one of the elements in shadow work. Okay. Okay, so Fiona says, sorry I missed the first 30 minutes. It's okay. The recording will be up. You can watch it. I do need to check whether the live stream, because my last live stream, what happened was the video and the voice, right, the audio did not sync, you know, in the recording of the live stream. And I thought that's weird. So then I had to do some editing work, and I posted another video on my channel. So I will check, and you know, you can try and watch the recording of this live stream, or you can watch the edited version. Okay, the first 30 minutes. And so I really appreciate, you know, all of you watching live here with me, and all the people who send me your questions prior to today. Appreciate your participation. I really want to do to grow this, you know, particular channel, because I want to make the classes here available to everyone. And so I will be doing 2 live streams a month at the moment. That's my target. But I'll be, you know, doing ongoing classes as recordings, and I'll be posting them out. So far, I have posted past classes that I've done, but I'll be coming up with new materials, and I'll be, you know, posting them as well Okay, so appreciate your time here and sharing your energy here with me today in this particular class. And I hope to see you again. And I welcome your feedback. If you have anything you like to comment below, even in the recording, I really appreciate it because your participation helps in the algorithm so that more people know about this channel as well. So if you can share this channel, I also appreciate it. Tell people, about the live classes. So first class was dream interpretation. This class is on ancestral healing. I will probably do one on inner child sometime down the road because the topic of shadow work is something I want to do in a live stream as well. I have a short recording on this, but I feel that more can be shared about this. So I will let me work out my schedule and the agenda, for all the. I have about 10 topics that I have in mind about what I want to cover for at least the next few months. Okay, so I will see you then. Have a wonderful day. And for those of you who are watching this at night in another part of the world, have a wonderful evening, and I will see you again soon. Bye for now. See you.